The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the pen scratching against paper at the clerk's desk across the room. My stepdaughter sat 12 feet away from me and stared at the wall like I didn't exist. And somewhere inside my coat pocket, folded into a small rectangle, was a letter that was about to change everything she thought she knew about me, and everything she thought she knew about her mother. I just had to hold myself together long enough to let it speak. My name is Claire, and before I tell you about the courtroom, I need to tell you about the breakfast, because that's where I always go back to when I try to understand how we ended up there. Not the arguments, not the legal papers, not the things that were said in anger in the middle of the night. I go back to a Thursday morning in April, about 2 years into my marriage to Owen, when Mia was 15. She came downstairs before school, and I had made eggs. Just scrambled eggs, nothing elaborate, the way I knew she liked them, not too dry. I set the plate at her spot at the table. I poured her orange juice. I had her backpack by the door because she always forgot it. She looked at the plate. She looked at me. And without a word, she picked up the plate, walked to the counter, scraped the eggs into the trash, and poured herself a bowl of cereal. She didn't look at me again. She ate her cereal, she grabbed her backpack, she left. I stood in that kitchen for a long time, looking at the empty pan on the stove. I wasn't angry. I was something more complicated than angry. I was a woman who had tried, for the 100th time, to love a child who was doing everything in her power not to be loved, and I was starting to wonder whether I was foolish for trying at all. I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know that Mia wasn't just a grieving girl who didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know she had been told a story, a careful, patient, deeply dishonest story about exactly who I was and why I was there. That story had an author, and her name was Diane. Owen's mother had silver hair, perfect posture, and the kind of smile that looked warm in photographs but felt in person like the light coming off something cold. She had adored Owen's first wife, Nora, had worshipped her, really, and I understood that. Nora had died of a sudden brain aneurysm when Mia was 10 years old, without warning, without goodbye. She was there one morning and gone by afternoon. A devastation so clean and complete that it left everyone around it permanently changed. Owen had barely functioned for a year. Mia had gone quiet in a way that her teachers said they had never seen a child go quiet before. And Diane had held them both together through it. I respected her for that, genuinely. But when Owen met me, at a conference of all places, both of us waiting in the same too-long coffee line, both of us rolling our eyes at the same conference speaker, and when things between us grew from coffee to dinner to something real and lasting and good, Diane's love for her family curdled into something else. She never raised her voice. She never made accusations I could directly address. She was far too clever for that. Instead, she was just always there, present at family dinners, filling the silences with stories about Nora, texting Mia constantly, taking her on weekends, and returning her subtly, incrementally different, a little more watchful, a little more closed off. Diane would look at me across a dinner table and say things like, "Claire, you must find it so challenging stepping into an established family like this," in a tone that made challenge sound like failure. Once, when she didn't know I was standing in the hallway, I heard her tell Mia, "I just worry about you, baby. Your dad is lonely, and sometimes lonely people make decisions that are more about themselves than about the people they love." I stood in that hallway, and I made a choice. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell Owen. I decided instead to be so consistently present, so reliably loving, so impossible to argue with in the daily evidence of my actions, that the story she was telling would eventually collapse under the weight of the truth. That was probably naive of me, but I was new to this, and I was trying my best, and I still believed then that love was enough on its own. The thing about a slow erosion is that you don't always see it happening. The texts from Mia stopped gradually. First, she'd reply later, then with less, then not at all. The Sunday movie nights that she and I had established, her choice of film always, and she had excellent taste, which I loved about her, started getting replaced with plans at Diane's house. I'd come home to an empty couch and a note from Owen that said, "Mia's at Mom's again. I'll pick her up at 9. I kept showing up. I kept making dinner. I kept leaving her favorite granola bars on the countertop and asking about her friends and sitting in the bleachers at her volleyball games in the cold, waving at her when she served, whether she waved back or not. She stopped waving back. One evening in November, Mia was 16 by then, I knocked on her bedroom door to let her know dinner was ready. She said, "I already ate." She hadn't. She'd been in her room for 3 hours. I pushed the door open slightly. "Hey, are you okay?" She was sitting on her bed with her phone, not looking at me. "Fine." "Mia." "You said fine, Claire." She said my name the way you'd say the name of someone you're trying to be polite to in a professional context. Careful, deliberate, a distance built right into the pronunciation. "Okay," I said. I pushed the door open slightly. "You know," and something in her voice made me stop, "you don't have to keep doing this." "Doing what?" "This." A vague gesture towards the door, towards me, toward whatever I represented in her mind. "The dinners and the games and the... I don't need a mom, Claire. I had one, so you don't have to keep trying." I stood in that doorway for a moment. "I know you had one," I said carefully. "I know that. I'm not trying to be her." "Then what are you trying to be?" I didn't have an answer, or maybe I had too many answers and didn't know how to choose between them. I closed the door. I went downstairs, I put her plate in the fridge, and I sat at the kitchen table alone, and I had a conversation with myself about whether I was making things worse by staying, whether my presence was the obstacle rather than the solution, whether the most loving thing I could do for this girl was to step back and give her space. I decided to stay. I always decided to stay. But it kept getting harder to explain to myself why. The papers arrived on a Tuesday. Owen was traveling for work. Mia was at school. I was home between client appointments. I run a small interior design practice from home. When the email notification appeared from a legal address I didn't recognize, I opened it, I read it twice, and then I sat very still at my desk for a while. Diane had filed for partial guardianship of Mia, citing concerns about the home environment and Owen's frequent travel. Her supporting documentation included a statement from Mia, signed, witnessed, dated, that described feeling emotionally unsupported at home and expressed a preference to spend more time in Diane's care. Attached to that statement was a single sentence that I kept returning to, the way your tongue keeps finding a sore tooth. "My stepmother has never made me feel like part of this family." I called Owen. He was stunned into silence for a long moment, and then the silence turned into something harder, and I could hear him trying to hold it together. "I'll come home tonight," he said. "You have meetings." "I'll come home tonight, Claire." He came home. We sat together at the kitchen table with the documents between us, and we talked for a long time. Owen was furious at his mother in a way I had rarely seen him. A cold, quiet fury, more devastating than shouting. He said he would handle it. I told him I wanted to handle it alongside him, not behind him. "She used Mia," he said. "She used her own granddaughter to make a legal case against my wife." "I think she used what Mia actually feels," I said carefully. "I don't think Mia made up those feelings. I think she was guided toward them. That's different." He looked at me. "How are you this calm?" I wasn't calm. I was vibrating with something that had no clean name. Not anger, not grief, not fear, but some sharp combination of all three. I just knew that falling apart wouldn't help anyone. So I held the pieces together, and I called a family law attorney the next morning. Her name was Priya. She was direct and thorough, and when I explained the situation, she said, "This case is winnable, but I need everything.
Every text, every school pickup record, every game you attended, every doctor's appointment. I need to build a picture of who you are to this child. I spent 2 weeks building that picture, and somewhere in the middle of building it, I found the letter. It was in a box in the back of the hall closet, tucked inside an envelope labeled, "For Mia when she's older," in handwriting I recognized from the cards Owen had shown me, Nora's handwriting. Round, deliberate, with small loops on the lowercase letters. I don't know why Owen hadn't given it her yet. Maybe it hurt too much to open it himself. Maybe he was waiting for the right time, and the right time had never felt right enough. I held the envelope for a long time. Then I brought it to Owen. He went very still when he saw it. He reached out and took it with both hands, the way you hold something fragile. He was quiet for a long time. "Did you read it?" I said. "No, it's not mine to read, but I think Mia needs to know it exists, whatever's inside. I think she needs to know her mother put something here for her." Owen opened the envelope slowly. He read it alone in the bedroom while I sat in the kitchen and waited. When he came out, his eyes were red. "She wrote it 2 weeks before she died. She knew something was wrong. She didn't know how bad, but she wrote to Mia about the future." He pressed his lips together. "She wrote about what she wanted for her, about hoping Mia would let people in, about not letting grief be the last word." He handed me the letter. I read it carefully, and then I understood exactly what we had. Not a weapon, not ammunition, a bridge. I called Priya that afternoon. "I have something," I said, "something that changes the emotional center of this whole case." The night before the hearing, Mia was home for dinner. We ate mostly in silence, the three of us, the way we often did now, each carrying the weight of the next morning, none of us sure how to put it down. Owen tried to talk about something ordinary, something light, but it kept sliding back into the quiet. After dinner, I was washing up at the sink when Mia came in and set her plate on the counter. She started to leave, then she stopped. "Are you scared?" she asked. Her voice was different from how it usually sounded when she spoke to me, younger somehow. I turned to look at her. "A little," I said honestly. "Are you?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands. "I don't know why she had to make it into this whole thing, Grandma. I just told her how I felt, and she turned it into this, a gesture that encompassed the entire impossible situation." I stayed very quiet. I had learned that with Mia, silence was sometimes the most important thing you could offer. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said, quietly, like a confession she hadn't planned to make. "I know," I said. "I still think—" She stopped. "I still don't think things have been easy between us. I don't want you to think I was lying about that." "I don't think you were lying. I think things have been hard. I think I've made mistakes. I think there's been a lot going on that's bigger than just you and me." A pause. "But I also think, I hope, that we're not done figuring it out." She looked at me then, really looked. The same watchful, measuring look from the very first time I met her, at a Sunday lunch 4 years ago, when she had sat across from me and assessed me with the careful eyes of a child who has learned that people leave. "There's a letter from your mom. The judge will see it tomorrow, but I asked Priya if you could have a copy first." I reached into the kitchen drawer where I had placed the copy that morning. I held it out to her.
She didn't move for a moment. Then she took it. She didn't read it there. She took it upstairs, and the house was very quiet for a long time. I finished the dishes. I turned off the kitchen light. At some point deep into the evening, I heard a sound from upstairs that I recognized, even muffled through the ceiling, as crying. Real crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and long held. I sat at the bottom of the stairs and I listened. I didn't go up. Some things need to happen in private. Some grief needs to breathe without an audience. But I stayed at the bottom of the stairs until the sound finally stopped. The courtroom was wood-paneled and fluorescent lit, and smelled faintly of old paper. I sat on one side. Diane sat on the other, composed and straight-backed in a charcoal blazer, her attorney beside her. Mia was not present. Priya had recommended against it to protect her from the pressure of being in the room where decisions were being made about her.
The hearing moved through its formal stages, arguments made, documents entered into evidence, records reviewed. Diane's attorney made his case carefully. Owen's frequent travel, the challenges of the blended family dynamic, Mia's own expressed preferences. He was good at his job. Then Priya stood up. She walked the judge through 3.5 years of documentation, attendance records, medical appointment logs, emails to Mia's teachers, photographs from volleyball games, school events, ordinary Saturdays. She submitted a statement from Mia's school counselor, who had noted Claire's consistent presence and involvement. She submitted messages between Mia and me from 2 years ago, small ones, the kind teenagers send, asking for advice about a friend situation, sending a funny meme, a single message at 11:30 p.m. that just said, "Can't sleep, anxious about tomorrow," and my response, 15 minutes later, "I'm awake too. Want me to come sit with you?" And then she submitted the letter. The judge received it. He read it slowly, the room completely silent around him. The only sound was the faint scratch of the clerk's pen. I watched the judge's face, and it was carefully neutral in the way that experienced faces learn to be, but his reading slowed near the end of the letter. He turned back and reread something. Then he set the letter down on the bench in front of him. He removed his glasses. He looked up, not at me, not at Priya, but across the aisle, directly at Diane. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, "I want to ask you something directly." Diane's attorney leaned slightly toward her. She straightened her already straight posture. The child's own mother, in her own words, written in the final weeks of her life, expressed a specific and clear wish for her daughter's future. She wrote about wanting Mia to allow herself to be loved, to not let grief build walls, to be open to the people who would show up for her. He paused. "Do you believe your actions over the past 2 years have served that wish, or worked against it?" The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever heard. Diane did not answer. The judge put his glasses back on. It didn't take long after that. He denied the petition, fully, without conditions. He noted that the record demonstrated a consistent, documented pattern of care and presence that spoke clearly to the commitment of Owen's wife toward his daughter. He noted that certain evidence raised serious concerns about whether the child had been subject to sustained influence that had colored her stated preferences. He ordered family counseling for all parties. And he said, and I will carry this for the rest of my life, that in his view, a parent is not defined only by biology or legal title. A parent is defined by who shows up, who stays, who does the quiet, unglamorous work of being present day after day, even when it isn't acknowledged. I sat in that courtroom and I let myself come apart just slightly, in the way you do when the thing you've been bracing against finally doesn't happen. Priya squeezed my arm. "Let's go," she said quietly. Owen was waiting in the hallway. He pulled me into a hug before I could say a word, and I stood in the fluorescent-lit corridor of a courthouse and let him hold me, and thought about scrambled eggs scraped into a trash can, and volleyball games in the cold, and a letter written by a woman I never met, but feel in some way I can't fully explain, like I know. Mia was in the kitchen when we got home. She was at the counter making tea, which she had recently started doing instead of coffee, and she turned when she heard us come in. She looked at our faces, reading them the way teenagers do, instinctive, accurate, exhausting. She looked at me. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. She nodded once. She turned back to her tea. Then, after a moment, she said, "There's enough water in the kettle if you want some." It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't an apology, it wasn't a Hollywood moment of tearful reconciliation. It was a cup of tea. And I want you to understand, it was everything. I hung up my coat, I got a mug from the cabinet, I stood beside her at the counter while the kettle finished boiling, and the kitchen was warm and quiet, and outside the window the evening was doing what evenings do,
turning slowly from gray to dark. She handed me the tea without being asked. I held it in both hands. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to.
That was 11 months ago. This morning, I woke up to a text from Mia. She's 17 now, prepping for college applications, a full and busy and increasingly independent person. The text said, "Found that documentary you mentioned, starting it tonight if you want to watch together." I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and I looked out the window at the ordinary morning world, and I thought about how much had to break and how much had to hold to get us here. I used to think I knew what family meant. Blood, history, shared last names, things you're given, not built. I know differently now. Family is the breakfast you make that gets thrown away, and you make it again the next morning anyway. It's sitting at the bottom of the stairs in the dark while someone cries themselves through grief you can't fix. It's the text at 11:30 at night, the volleyball game in the cold, the mug of tea passed hand to hand in a quiet kitchen at the end of a long and terrifying day. It's not something you inherit, it's something you choose, over and over and over again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And if you're reading this in the middle of your own version of this story, still showing up, still trying, still wondering if any of it is landing, I want you to know something. It is. Even when they throw away the eggs, even when they don't look at you, even when no one has said thank you yet, you are building something real. And one day, quietly, in a kitchen that smells like tea, you will feel it take shape in your hands. Keep going.